She took Riley's hand. "Hugh's somehow knocked himself out. The ambulance is on its way." Her father nodded as he shuffled from the room. The intense expression on his weathered face communicated how hard he was concentrating to move as quickly as he could. She squeezed Riley's fingers. "Dad's gone to get the gator key, and then we'll check on your dad." When her father returned, he was only halfway across the living room when he nodded. Sibylla lifted her hand to catch the key he threw across to her to save time. A bittersweet happiness briefly shouldered aside her worry. As strained as their relationship was, in a time of crisis they were still the team they'd been in her childhood. "Thanks," she said, voice quiet. He gave her a barely there smile before lowering himself into a nearby chair. With Riley's hand in hers, she headed for the side-by-side gator in the corrugated iron shed. As fast as her heart beat and thoughts raced, she kept their pace even. Riley would be exhausted, and she wanted her composure to reassure him. When she clicked in his seatbelt, he looked over his shoulder, his eyes teary. She dropped a kiss on his tousled, nutmeg-brown head. Even covered in red dirt, he smelt like fresh, sun-dried cotton. "Jelly will be okay. She'll be right behind us." When Riley nodded and sought Sibylla's hand, she blinked to keep her own emotions at bay. It had been only 3 weeks since she'd stopped at her neighbour's front gate to chat to the boy and his pony who were waiting for the mail contractor. It had only taken 3 visits for motherless little Riley to sneak into the space she always made sure her small audiologist patients never accessed. Brave, curious, and intellectually gifted, Riley was special. She turned on the gator before the thought could follow that his slow-smiling father was too. As she'd predicted, the bay mini pony cantered behind them as they made their way through the boundary gate between the 2 properties. But the closer she drove to Hillside, the less she turned to see where Jelly was. Her attention fixed on the shiny roofline of the large shed beyond the green expanse of the back garden. She then focused on where Hugh's white farm Hilux was parked in front of the end bay. As it was the weekend, the local horse chiropractor would have been busy doing farm work with his tan Kelpie, Diesel. Her fingers locked around the steering wheel as she searched the ground. But the only thing out of place was a fallen branch from the old gum that stood between the shed and the stables. There also didn't look to be any ominous patches of blood darkening the dust. Riley tugged at her arm. "Dad's gone!" She turned the gator towards the house. "He'll be inside." She failed to keep the relief out of her words. "Look, there's Diesel by the back door." It made no sense that Hugh being conscious should ease the tightness in her chest. As much as Riley had welcomed her into his life, his distant, taciturn father hadn't been as open. She could count on one hand the times he'd said more than 2 sentences to her. It was only when he was with his son that she glimpsed the warmth and humour beneath his reserve. Riley had his seatbelt unclipped even before the gator engine noise quietened. She made sure she took his hand before they entered the back door. The kitchen appeared empty. Then a crash sounded down the hallway. "Dad!" Riley ploughed his way through the open door. Sibylla slowed him when she saw Hugh leaning against the wall outside Riley's bedroom. Dirt and grass covered his left side, and his usual wide-brimmed hat was missing. Sibylla may as well have not spoken. When father and son saw each other, Riley dragged his hand free, and Hugh pushed himself away from the wall. It was only Riley's tight arms around his father's waist, and Sibylla grabbing Hugh's shoulder to hold him upright, that stopped him from slumping forward. "Let's get your dad into the kitchen," Sibylla said, working hard to get Hugh's arm around her shoulders. From her previous stealthy glances, she knew he was all bone and work-hardened muscle, but the reality of supporting his large frame rendered her breathless. When they made it to the kitchen and he was finally in the closest chair, she left her hands where they were on his shoulder and chest to drag in a breath. She caught the scent of cedar and registered the stubble softening the firm line of his jaw. Beneath her palms, the heat from his skin bypassed the cotton of his green work shirt. Beneath her fingertips,